Alright.
Yeah, like that.
Okay, well, it's locked now.
Okay. We'll just have to leave it like that.
It's fine, so people are watching right now.
How did you guys not know that that was the problem? That's so silly.
How's Ola? Good?
Yeah, nice. Pretty good. Let's not get the door in the way, in case people...
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, I'm watching.
Right, I think we'll get going then. We're grateful to Jim, who's come despite babysitter problems. All right, I won't, well, I just did, but anyway.
We ate that.
So good evening, everyone. I am Rashmi Roshanlal, and it is a very great pleasure to welcome you tonight to Goldsmith School of Media Communications and Cultural Studies Media Forum Series. That's a bit of a mouthful, but basically what we do is we lay on these events to discuss issues to do with journalism and current affairs coverage, and what could be more topical than the topic, is the subject that is under discussion today. What's the future of journalism in the age of AI? Now that's assuming there is a future.
Yeah, that's what
So we got to find out if there is, and hopefully our panel will be able to provide
Okay, now it's a bit too much to this side.
So let me just start quickly by introducing Jim Egan, who's here, and Alex Farber, and Jim Waterson. And before I actually give you a little thumbnail sketch of their bios, I should just say that Jim Egan is the reason we have this very pithy aside, in which he said that we don't have enough diversity on this panel. We don't even have people with different first names. We have two people with the same first name. But the truth of the matter is that this panel has a lot of diversity of experience and knowledge. So, let me start by just reading out a few things about the three panelists. Jim Egan is the new lead author of the Digital News Report, the world's largest annual survey of news consumption and audience behavior at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford University. He spent more than 20 years in the international news sector, most of it with BBC News. He was Chief Executive Officer of BBC World News and BBC.com. He was Chief Investment Officer of Media Development Investment Fund, which provides loans to news outlets in countries where press freedom is under threat. And he was part of the executive leadership team at FT Strategies, the media consulting arm of the Financial Times in London. Alex Farber began his career in music journalism before becoming a B2B, a business-to-business reporter. He worked for New Media Age, a digital content and marketing magazine, before spending 13 years writing about the UK's broadcasters, production companies, and streamers for Broadcast magazine. He joined the Times as its media correspondent in 2023. Jim Waterson is the founder and editor of London Centric, the 13-month-old Substack that promises, and I think it delivers, robust reporting on London. Jim, I think, has described London Centric as a modern news outlet doing journalism in the old-fashioned way. He was formerly media editor of The Guardian and political editor of BuzzFeed UK. So that's our panel, and I'm very much looking forward to getting the discussion going. The way we'll do this is each panelist will take 10 minutes or so to lay out what they want to highlight about their work, particularly if relevant to the topic. Then we'll have a discussion, we'll throw it open to questions, and then we'll continue the conversation over a glass of something and cheese straws. So that's where we are. So, Jim, would you like to start?
Which one?
Yes, Jim E. I should say Jim E and Jim W. Okay, so there you go. And there's your, there you go.
Thanks very much, Stephanie, for the invitation. Thanks everyone for coming out on a not very warm Tuesday night. Despite the sort of chronic lack of diversity in many ways on the panel, I do actually think we are going to have some contrasting perspectives. So I'm going to try and talk a little bit about what's going on, what the data actually shows in terms of what audiences, what user consumers are doing in these sort of very early days of AI in journalism, which is just about, I think most people would trace the history back to November 2022. So we're about 3 years in to what is inevitably going to be over a rather longer journey. So I've just got a few slides just to share with you what seems to be happening at this relatively early stage. Before I get going, we may just have a brief interactive element. So raise your hands. So I'm going to ask you two questions. So raise your hands if you've ever used an AI like chatbot like ChatGPT or something like that. Ever. So, okay, so it's interesting. So it's nearly everyone. And raise your hand again if you've used it in the last week.
No.
That's quite significant, isn't it? So we're going from 0 to, I don't know, 75, 80% in 3 years. Here's what the data actually shows. I'm going to show you figures from a couple of studies. This first one is data that was just released last month by some of my colleagues up at the Institute. And I think this is basically the answers to the two questions I've just asked you. So I think the more interesting one is that we're now more than a third of people in these 6 countries, Argentina, Denmark, France, Japan, the UK and the US, more than a third of people are now using some sort of generative AI each week, and that's pretty much doubled in the space of 12 months. So this is evidently a fast-moving sector. That's what everybody says, and that's what the data is showing us as well. And I think what's also interesting is that what people are doing when they're using these AI chatbots, and there's a big debate about whether or not they're chatbots. I'm just going to call them chatbots, okay? What people are doing is also changing as well. So a year ago, it was more about kind of creating media, generating images, short clips, and so on and so forth. But as you can see in that purple line there, there's been a big jump in people who are starting to use AI for getting information. And this is one of the big strategic threats in the industry, that the poor old legacy traditional publishers are saying, well, crikey, we've been through the search era, we've been through the mobile era, we've been through the social era, like we're having to distribute across all these different platforms, and now everyone's starting to flock to AI to get some of their news and information. So this, for most people who are established in the news industry, is quite a headache. This number here is quite interesting as well, social interaction. So we've probably all read articles about people who are befriending their AI, and some people are forming relationships which probably aren't healthy from a psychological point of view. That is starting to happen. Let me now just switch a little bit from what people are doing to what they think. So this data is from the big report we do across 48 countries in which we have nationally representative samples. And my feeling is that when you ask people how they think AI is going to change the news, they've probably got it about right. Okay? So it's going to be cheaper, easier to make, quicker to make as well, but it's not going to do much for the things that those of us who are in any way purists about journalism, think are sort of core editorial values around accuracy, trustworthiness, and so on and so forth. So I think this is the tightrope that everyone's having to walk, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit later. These AI tools, you're using them, I'm sure everyone here is using them. They are fantastic in terms of being able to speed up some aspects of the work that you do. But the real problem for news, where you emphasise, you prioritise things like accuracy and trustworthiness, is that these large language models, these LLMs, these are not truth machines, right? These are prediction machines, that they're basically taking huge amounts of data and guessing the most likely next word. And we've all seen instances of where this goes spectacularly wrong. So wherever you are in the news industry, whether you're just starting out, whether you're senior, whether you're in a sort of new entrant, startup business, whether you're in an established entity, trying to navigate and tread this very, very fine line is really, at the heart of the challenge, I think, for organisations all over the world. The last thing I'll say, because there's only so much data anyone wants this time of night, is it's very interesting how international attitudes vary quite a lot. So along the bottom of this chart here, we ask people, how comfortable are you with news being produced with AI helping out? And then along the y-axis there, we're asking people, are you using, as I asked you, are you using chatbots for news? And you can see really interesting spread. In India, they are like super enthusiastic about it and super keen on using it regularly. And then down here, sort of towards the bottom left, you've got a cluster of much more sceptical countries, which includes the UK. And I think that international context is worth bearing in mind, because wherever we are right now in the UK is not where everybody else is at. Right? There are some countries who, whether it's individuals or it's news publishers, are just galloping along on this. And I think it's almost inevitable that whether we do it super quickly or steadily, we're going to catch up. This is the same data really, just presented in another way. So these are the 4 most comfortable countries in our survey. People who tell us that they're relatively really quite relaxed with the idea of AI being used in news. And then you have this skeptical, very wary, and I think sort of particularly wary here in the UK. I think this is partly conditioned by the debate we've had about social media and the Online Safety Act and so on and so forth. You see people in the UK being very bearish about new technology and what it might do. And here's just a screenshot of an AI anchor, famously on Channel 4 a few weeks ago. They had a show which was like, what's the future of AI? And the big reveal at the end was that the presenter was an AI avatar. And this AI anchor kind of is running the whole time on Mono 2029 in Thailand. Just another indication of kind of how much further along people are. So just a little bit of data. And I think that, the things I'd like to leave you with are, it's very interesting how different the picture is, and I think it's worth reflecting on whether kind of we're dangerously behind in the UK or appropriately behind. People do understand, when you ask regular people in opinion polls as we do, what they think AI is going to do to the news, they've got quite a good intuitive sense of what it might do to the news and what some of the dangers and the risks are. And things, as you've seen in all these charts, are moving really, really quickly, and that raises big questions for policymakers and regulators. I think Ofcom is still grappling with the Online Safety Act and regulating social media, and now thinking, oh my goodness, we have to, how do we get our heads around AI and the impact that it may have. News businesses, whatever size and whatever longevity they enjoy, are having to think really hard about how do we use this so that it actually helps our strategy rather than blowing it up. And for those of you who are lucky to be young enough to be students, I think there are big questions here about what this might do to the industry, and also what it might do to your careers as well, and the sorts of things you should be interested in, and the career paths that you might take. And I dare say that's something we can get into a bit later on. Okay, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. In fact, it's funny, when you were saying that in South Asia and Asia generally, there's such a happy take-up of AI, I thought you might want to see this.
From Dawn, yeah.
Yes, this is very famous. I don't know if everyone's seen it. But this is not a problem with AI. This is the human beings there. They left that in. Okay, anyway.
I mean, the problem is that the paragraph above is about tractor sale units, so I think if anyone has made it past that,
Yes, indeed. Alex, did you want to?
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't think I've got anything to show.
But if you want your.
No, it's fine. I don't think I should. It's not very interesting. Thank you.
There you go.
That's me.
yeah, that's it.
That's you. We are reassured.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that. So I think what Jim did excellently then was give us a big, very macro view of AI and some data around it. And I'm just going to talk a little bit more off the top of my head, so forgive me if I'm not quite as coherent or structured. And I think initially I'll talk about how News UK, the business that owns the Times newspaper, considers AI sort of at the top level, and then I'll come in and sort of address a little bit more about how I see it impacting what I do on a more day-to-day level, because I think they're quite two sort of distinct things, as it were. So definitely News UK, I would say, since I've been there in the last 3 years or so, is a very sort of multi-platform, digital-focused business who's very aware of, as a publisher, as a huge international publisher, of the opportunity afforded by AI. Not least when we see it as, they see it as a opportunity to partner with some of the giants. I think they've done a big multi-million-dollar deal with OpenAI to make sure that the content that the journalists are producing is being fed into the Gen AI machines, so that as and when people are searching for what's happening, you know, the content that we're producing is among the stories that are being surfaced. And you know, there's a value exchange to be done there with regards to citations and click-throughs, etc., etc. And then at a more sort of company level, I suppose, many ways in which the business is making use of AI systems, whether it's around sort of contracts and efficiencies and sort of more back-end. So there's definitely areas where guys within the business are developing proprietary bits and bobs, whether it's a transcription service or, as I said, things for producing contracts that are tools to enable the staff that work at the newspaper in a variety of roles, from marketing to legal to court to commercial, to make use of the benefits that it affords. And then as a journalist, the way in which I am using AI is sort of a work in progress, I suppose, and I would describe it as another tool that I'm starting to get to grips with and become more familiar with, a bit like you guys who are putting your hands up and saying, yeah, I'm using it in the last week or so. That's kind of where I am with it to a degree. So whilst I would say that there's no, it's not a substitute for original journalism with regards meeting contacts, building relationships, getting on the phone, asking the right people the right questions to really find out what's going on in the industry, to enable me to do my job as best as I can by really getting under the skin of businesses and, yeah, telling people what's happening. You know, we've just had a huge week with the BBC, a huge couple of weeks with the BBC, and my bosses want to know, you know, what's happening at Panorama, you know, what's happening, what's the BBC thinking about how they're going to deal with this threat of being sued from Trump. You know, how did this edit get signed off? What's the mood like within the BBC? It's obviously been a huge story. AI hasn't really helped me with that story in a meaningful way, because the way in which I got into that story is by, yeah, source-based journalism, is by talking to people who I've developed relationships with. But that's not to say that it doesn't have a perfectly legitimate role in other areas. So where I found it useful would be in, if I get a very, very long report, for example, from someone like the Reuters Institute, and I want, which is full of fascinating techniques, but I might want to distill very quickly a 50-page document, and I might want to summarise some of the key points of that. Now, I'd always go away in seconds and check what it was telling me, but I can very quickly drill down to quick parts within the reports to look out for trends, pull out key quotes, because often you're working very quickly into deadline, and I think it's a very useful tool with that. And you can put in place, when it comes to trust, I think there's a proprietary notebook LM tool that we've developed, and I'm sure some of the apps themselves, whether it's PDF or whatever they are, you know, they have, you literally are only searching the report, so there's guardrails in place so that you can rely on what you're being told. So that's one area in which I've been using it increasingly to help me do my job quicker. And then this is beyond the very prosaic transcription software, which is AI and which I use all the time, but I don't consider it to be, it's you know, it's useful, but it's not content producing, if you like. That's just a pure efficiency play. But there is other areas. So I was thinking about a story I did, which is a lighter story, but nevertheless has some value, around Netflix came to me and said, we've been in the film industry for 10 years now and we'd like to make a bit of noise around it, and we've launched this many films under our own studio. And I went to the data, in and of itself, we've released 1,000 films over the past 10 years. And in and of itself, that was moderately interesting, but I needed to work that a little bit harder in order to sell it into my editors to be able to get it into the newspaper. So I thought, how can we make this more interesting? So I thought, well, we've got 10 years of data from Netflix. Let's see how they're performing versus the other studios, you know, Disney and Universal and Warner, etc., etc. You know, how has Netflix performed over that decade? So I spoke to our data team. This wasn't something I was able to do, but more technically proficient people than I am within the business. And I said, is there some way we're able to, you know, track the scores on IMDb against how those titles are performing? And very quickly, using AI, they were able to build a sort of graph that pulled together that information, which kind of existed all over the internet, but they were able to gather it and spit it out in a way that made a story that was slightly more compelling, you know. And whilst I'm sure that work could have been done pre-ed, it almost certainly could have been done pre-ed because it all exists on the internet. It's that kind of journalism that can be done quicker and more efficiently and more effectively. So I think the main way in which I have found it, and there's been other examples of that with regards, again, lighter stories, which still have value in a newspaper. You need a mix of light and shade. If we've done things in the past like Strictly dances, and who's won Strictly, and the scores they've got, or something on Bake Off, and you know, this series versus that series. So where I think I've found it the most useful is with regards rapidly being across big data sets to distill them and pull out interesting trends. And as I said, that sits alongside other areas in which the business is using it, article summaries, helping to write headlines and prompts to different lengths, slightly more production-focused areas. From a content creation point of view, it's another tool in the box. I think it's, you know, sits alongside Google in some respects, and we'll end up using it increasingly for certain tasks. And as it becomes more sophisticated, I think those tasks will only expand. So that's what I'd say my 2 cents worth is, and I hope it's some value.
Sure, okay, I will also stand up, as long as you don't have a big picture of my face.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't have a big
Oh,
picture.
forgive me. Okay, well, we'll take that. This is my site. This is London Centric, which is a small startup news outlet that I run. I used to be media editor of The Guardian. The person you should really listen to tonight is Jim Wan here, who his reports that he and his team put out are absolutely fantastic, brilliant things to look through. They're very readable, they're very to the point, and you can trace the way that things are changing over time. It's 15 years since I sat in a seat at the back of this room after a friend had invited me along to it. There's nothing there, you don't have to look back. There's not a plaque above it. But a friend who was studying here had invited me along to presumably a precursor of one of these. And the 3 people sitting at the front here were discussing political blogging. It was the future. We were all going to be hyperlinking to each other, and little in-the-know blogs would be what everyone followed and got the news from. So I guess there's 2 things. One, I can't really remember anything that was actually said on that panel, so I'm not getting ahead of myself in any of this sticking. And secondly, that almost all the guesses as to where things were going were probably wrong. We didn't end up with the world run by just political bloggers with sort of brands. We ended up with individuals screaming into the void on their own social media platforms. So as of anything on the future of journalism, you're always trying to guess. But really quickly, I'm just going to make a couple of quick thematic points. One is about the thing that will matter most to you in this room, which is about getting jobs and where employment is going to be in the immediate future, that first step, that first immediate thing that you can get to cling on to a hope of getting a job in this industry. And then secondly, a bit about where I would use it and where I view the ability for this to become a business off the back of it, and where journalism will get its strength from. On the first point, I've just been at an event with a lot of media execs who are all panicked about AI. They are all doing 2 things. They are randomly spreading AI across their content and hoping that that will save their jobs for at least another 3 or 4 years and make them look clever when they go to the board. And secondly, they absolutely are convinced that the market for middle ground content is about to collapse. Jim talked about this, the idea of the sort of intro job, the sub-editor, the need for sort of 10 staff to put something together rather than just 2 or 3. And most pertinently, probably, a lot of the reason I mentioned myself sitting back in the room was I thought I was joining an industry that was on the cusp of dying. And 15 years later, it looks like it might actually be dying in some sense. Those sort of, the whole basis of everything is a newsroom which pushes out stuff with a team of people publishing a single individual publication. I've been running away from the collapse of that now for 15 years, and I'm starting to wonder if we're actually finally at the point where it falls off the cliff. Because they just don't need the same number of 22, 23-year-olds coming in. It's harder and there's less incentives for them to train people up. And the only real good thing in your favour is that you're all the ones who are already sticking your hand up and know in your heart and your soul, you're just like your gut feeling for where this is going to go and what it's going to be. And that's the advantage that you've got. Weirdly, in my day was the fact I was really good at Twitter. I mean, I know that sounds preposterous now, but like, if you even understood how to make something go viral on Facebook in a newsroom in 2010, 2011, it was seen as magic sauce. Your magic sauce that you've got is the ability to understand AI as people have been using it from the very start of the time you've been thinking about journalism. The downside for it is that the churning jobs, those sort of entry-level ones, the local papers that need 8 stories a day written, they weren't much of a job, but they aren't going to be around for long. You can already see the number of outlets that are turning to AI, and as soon as that, when the cost of employing those journalists starts to collide with that 10% of people who trust it, at some point you know that the news outlets are going to go for the cheaper option. It's just going to be the case. I say this, and here's the optimistic part, the pivot to the bit where you can actually take some solace from this. The one hope I have is that good stuff must need humans to create it, because it will be the only thing that has soul. It will be the only thing that people want to pay for. And that my bet is you'll end up with a mass market of churned nothingness filtered through AI, and you'll end up with niche, possibly a business model that in a lot of cases has more in common with the creator economy and influencers than a lot of traditional newsrooms, being led by individuals who have their face at the top of everything. That's the gamble I've taken with the site that I'm doing, the idea that it's a bit of a personal newsletter from someone you could trust twice a week telling you some news about London. And I think that there is a bit of an opening there. For people who are really nimble, it's going to be twice as hard as the previous generation to get a job, but there is also so many more opportunities for people who are smart and think about how to do it on their own, who can use the tools in ways that the people in their mid-30s and older who are just panicking now and don't know what to do can't instinctively get it. And you will then be able to turn that into something new. So that's the optimistic case. The negative case, probably we're at the end game of what came before. And the good thing is you're at the ground floor for what comes next. So let's find out if that actually checks out when you ask the questions. Thanks.
I'm just going to quickly move back to a screen that is more representative of what we are talking about. And then I did want to ask you, and we'll do a rapid fire round. I know, Jim, you said that it's the profession is dead.
No, I just.
But then you said it was.
Well, it's not dead.
So let me just ask each of you first, just yes, no. Is there a future? Does journalism have a future in the age of AI?
Yeah,
Yes.
100, yes.
Okay.
Is that what we need? Yes.
Absolutely.
Definitely, you need to look in the right place.
Okay. So we were just looking for yes, no. Now we can expand. Now we can expand a little bit, because I think it is the caveats that are the most interesting. You seem to suggest, Jim Waterson, that it is niche angle journalism, thoughtful journalism, deep journalism that will actually survive. And if I got what you were saying correctly.
It will survive as a business model catering to a small elite, yeah. Whether that is actually, I think mass media is just going to end up being endless short form social video clips until we're just sort of, our brains are rotted to death. But in terms of actual reporting and things with quality, yeah, I think there's going to be an audience for that. And my whole pitch, which so far on a small scale is working, is essentially I'm an AI-free product, but I don't use AI. I do everything in a possibly hard human way, and that is what I'm selling. And people like that. It's almost like in an age where I don't know what I'm doing, I'm like, it's me doing it personally, and I will talk you through how I've got this information, and I'm not using anything from AI at all, and that's the selling point. And then the mass media will probably just end up being leveled down to something else.
So would the mass media include the Times?
So that's a question, but
No, in your estimation,
no, because that's
because
the scale. You charge to an elite. Yeah.
But I mean, to define elites, I mean, I think there's a growing understanding that you need to pay for journalism, and you know, niche and elite are not necessarily the same things. I mean, would you describe your audience as elite?
Massively.
Or would you?
Well, like Nick halfway.
No, but I mean, there's how many subscribers do you guys have?
Oh, hundreds of thousands, I should know.
It's like several hundred thousand.
Yeah.
So it's like both a lot and in the scale of the country, like not a lot. It's sort of a bit of both.
I just think there's a role for, I just think there's an opportunity, as Substack is demonstrating, I do think there's a role for paid for original journalism of all shapes and sizes. But I think original journalism is the key, as opposed to the slop that Jim is worried about taking over the mass market. But I do hope that we are moving into an era in which people are increasingly prepared to pay for content that they value. And yeah, I think that can be of various shapes and sizes, but I don't think it's the end of the industry. I think Jim's right, more right when he says, you know, it's an evolution with the dawn of a new beginning, which may not look like, you know, a very commoditised race to the bottom, which this is just only going to accelerate when it comes to, you know, your ad-funded, volume-driven businesses.
So Jim, you were saying, you were saying that it will survive, but it depends. And I was a bit hard on you for adding 4 words. But what did you mean exactly? What did you see as emerging from all that you study?
Well, I think some news businesses are already very poorly, and some of them will die. But that doesn't mean that journalism as an industry and a sector is dying. You know, fundamentally, demand for news is it's a pretty basic kind of like human motivation. We use the word what's the news very very generally, right? People love to know what's going on, but we're not in the world that we were pre the turn of this century, where there was a monopoly on sort of time and attention, as we all know, because of the phones we have in all of our pockets. It's extremely competitive, and you've got all sorts of content providers and distributors like competing for your attention. So it's tough being in news, but there are some. I mean, they hate this term, legacy news businesses, that I think we probably are going to start saying goodbye to. But that's not a very interesting or energising way of thinking about it and place look. I think that there is still, in the area where Alex spent much of his time, in the B2B, so in the trade press. I mean, this is still, bear in mind, this is where most journalists in the UK are not in consumer news, they're in trade news, and there are good jobs in good businesses where you have an audience there who literally wants to pay for that content because it's critical to them making progress with their own businesses. So don't be sniffy about what people call B2B journalism, because I think that's an interesting area to look. I think there are new businesses starting. So one area that's very easy to get impressed about is local news. Well, it's very easy to get impressed if you used to run a local news empire, right? Because I'm afraid I see next to no future for those businesses. And if you ever go on to what used to be the Kent Messenger or News Shopper around here, I mean, they're almost unbearable. I mean, they are so drowning in ad pop-ups, things you can't click away, and so on and so forth, because they're just trying to cut their way back to profitability and so on. But look at what's going on. Look at the really exciting innovation that's happening in local news, both in North America, here in the UK. I think London is one of the hardest places to get local news working. It sounds, Jim, like you're making a good fist of it, right? And these are small businesses. And one thing I would say is that in my experience, again, I'm not a journalist, right? So no one's ever accused me of that. But I used to spend time at the BBC when I was in, I was like, corporate overhead. Exactly the sort of management cadre that everyone at the BBC hated. They would say, I don't do numbers, I'm not interested in figures and so on and so forth. Journalism is becoming an enterprise vocation, right? No one can afford anymore not to care about the numbers, not to care about the finances and so on. One thing I would really encourage you to do is to think about how whatever journalistic enterprise you're going to join makes money, and you as the editorial content people don't need to be as interested in it as the people running business, but you need to be interested. So that's something that I think is really important. And then I'm not sniffy about the whole news influencer creator area, right? It's very, very easy to dismiss that as like, a bunch of wackos, with microphones in their bedrooms and so on and so forth. But, look at what's happening. So in France, there's a guy called Hugo Travers runs a business called Hugo Decrypt. He started out as a guy in his bedroom. He's now employing nearly 30 people. He's interviewed both Macron and Zelensky this year. That's turning into real business. Famously, a woman called Barry Weiss left the New York Times less than 5 years ago, I think. Started something called the Free Press, which was recently bought for $150 million. So, these are not nothing, the news influence and creative space. So that's why I say you need to think differently about where you might look. And if you look in the right places, I think you will see exciting things going on in the journey.
Yeah, that's reassuring. The two questions that really do come to mind are, is this going to be a job apocalypse, of entry-level people, as Jim was saying? And if that is the case, then how do we get editors when we don't have sub-editors and cub reporters? So what's going to happen? I mean, if all of you or whoever's minded could address that, that is a very important question.
Well, I mean, I'll have the macro view and the long-term view, like Jim's perspective that Jim's probably got. But I mean, I would say we've identified a few areas. Jim has demonstrated if you've got enough chutzpah and get up and go, you can build something from nothing if you're chasing the right stories and building the right profile. Other Jim has mentioned, where I started my career in business journalism, which I appreciate it's not, the big legacy brands that everyone's heard of, but at the same time, you're fulfilling a valuable role for an audience that's prepared to pay. So, I also think, there's the extent to which I was kind of trying to allude to it there as a tool, and I think Jim was too. There's new forms of reporting that have and are being created and developed and evolving now that will create opportunities in and of themselves. So, AI, if you interview someone, you can spit out a podcast and you can do a YouTube video and it can help you, expedite all those things much quicker. Build a gallery, I don't know all the things because I'm not like I said, not a digital native. So, yes, I think you can easily be glass half full or glass half empty. And I think there's, as I think the guys have reflected, there's sufficient opportunities, one would hope, to mean that it's not going to be an apocalypse, it's going to be an evolution.
So what it sounds like to me is that you're saying that you take journalism and then use AI to turn it into content. I mean, does that make any sense? In the sense of you repackage it into various things. Original journalism.
I think that's what's going to happen to the mass market, right? I think that's what's everything will end up being. You see this a lot, and it's funny to see India up there because quite often if you Google, there'll be an Indian churn site that is so obviously AI rewriting Western news outlets to get Google clicks, and all of this is being done to get a fraction of pennies. Like, let's just be really clear in case people don't get it what the business model is for a lot of local papers. It's easier just to use them because they're good. So you go onto Someone shout out the name of a line. Does anyone know Reach? Who's a company
Yeah.
who do local stuff? Yeah, but does anyone here? Right, anyone got the name of a site that they run? Go on.
My London.
Yeah, so actually, you know what? I've been hard on my London. They're actually better than most that they have in their but let's take it because people might know it. So their model is basically they try and do some good stuff like proper reporting in there, but basically they have click targets. They have to do up to 8 stories a day, and their model at the moment is hire someone on basically minimum wage who is desperate to sort of change the world, and that they will then have to write 8 stories a day, and then before you know it. And hit click targets, and the idea is enough people click that they show enough ads that they can then just about make enough money to cover the salary and a bit of profit for the company. And if that margin starts to dip, you've got nowhere to go. So that's the most, honestly, that's why it's important to understand the business model of the place you're joining. And so, at some point, why not? You can see this in NewsQuest, who own a lot of other local papers in London and elsewhere. They've got a thing that they have on the byline, AI assisted reporter. Those people feed in a press release, look at it, press publish 30 times a day. That's just not, at some point you're just going to remove the human from that. So that's what's gone before, and that's what's coming in the end game. But the sort of creator influence model, I think Jim would be really good to speak on this as well, is an interesting outrun of that, in that you can do a lot as an individual now. The issue and the thing that you'll be lacking if you're starting out is the knowledge of how to work a story, present it, do the legals on it, and make sure that you're not going to get sued to oblivion. Because learning how to work a story is something you can only really pick up from other people who've been before, and it helps to sit in a newsroom with them for 10 years. So that's the gap in the current model that if we shift towards individuals doing it.
I mean, before I come to you, Joe, if you'd like to speak about the influencer model, that's exactly what there's an American philosopher who's talked about the big problem that's coming, de-skilling. Which, basically you don't learn anything because you've not done it. So you can't do anything, and you can't do it very well. I don't know.
I think that's a slightly static way of looking at it, if I may. I mean, for sure, a lot of the conventional journalism jobs, the cub reporters, the sub-editors, broadcast journalists, there's going to be fewer of those going around, but there's a whole cadre of jobs opening up now that just didn't exist 10 years ago. Multimedia editors, data visualization, people working in digital product, audience engagement, and so on and so forth. So it might not have journalist in the job title, but you are still, in some way or other, using the journalistic skills and the knowledge that you've acquired and so on. So maybe I'm being a bit panglossian, but I'm inclined to think that good journalism that has a real relationship with the audiences that people are willing to pay for either directly or in other ways will find a way of getting paid, and there will be businesses built around that. And it might be more fragmented, and businesses might be smaller rather than larger. But please don't, as a result of time or anything else, think, crikey, I'm studying the wrong thing. I need to get out of it, because I think there is a future. Again, if you look in the right place. One other thing I'll say is that very long time ago, when I started looking for jobs, it was really important to say on your CV, computer literate. I know how to use a computer. And old people at the time, when I was young, wow, God, that's very good. But now, of course, that doesn't matter at all, right? So in 10 years' time, saying, I understand AI, and I know the difference between an LLM and RAG and so on, that won't matter, but right now it does matter. So as well as kind of like getting your head around finance and enterprise, it's like I would be curious, enthusiastic, play with these tools, see what they can do, because the old people who are running news businesses now, they want to learn from you, and they want some reassurance that you are going to bring in skills, even if it is things that you've been doing from your bedroom, figuring out how to build a YouTube audience and so on and so forth. They want to know these kind of like modern media skills, because they for sure don't have them.
Right. If I could just quickly ask you, Jim Watson, you said that you don't use AI at all.
I use it for sort of glorified spell checking and pretty much nothing else.
Nothing else.
I wouldn't be against using to automate sending FRI requests or sort of back office things, but basically it's almost part of the pitch.
So transcription, would you
Yeah.
do that? And semantic searches, do which is what
What's
Alex.
the semantics?
Well, just for words. You're looking for words in.
No, I wouldn't use it for that. No. But that's.
No, in documents. In a big.
No, I haven't been using it.
You have, but you have.
Yeah, occasionally, more experimenting, but yeah, as long as you're checking, I mean, I'd always read it, but, if you're within the guardrail, yes.
I mean, last week, when the Republicans in the United States dumped 23,000 pages of documents in the public domain, then NPR, National Public Radio, and the New York Times were able to get their summary out right away because they could see that it was 1,000 references to Donald Trump in the Epstein, documents. So they did that through AI.
So they did that. So they showed that I hadn't seen that, but so they showed that there were 1,000 references. But the issue is what were the references?
Then you had to go and
It's
look
like
at it.
it's not just weighing it. It's like what's the context and what's it. And I've had issues where I've spent weeks on an original report into something going on in London, and a reader's got in touch and said, really liked it, but actually I just went and fact checked it and it's not right. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I just put it into chat and yeah, it says it's wrong. Like, yeah, but no, the AI is wrong. They just wouldn't really accept that. And I thought that was fascinating, that it was definitely, they're like, but that would mean questioning everything else it tells me, because it had been trained on an old news report that was just, I'd shown was wrong.
I mean, is this sort of thing happening to you?
No.
With AI?
No, but it's wrong. I've known it be wrong, very much so. I remember not long after I started, at the paper, they asked me to, it was a Sunday shift, and I had to write a story about Prince Charles, I think as he was then, and doing something with the RAF, and I was looking for quotes that he might have said. So I thought, and this was 2.5 years ago, so I plugged in what Prince Charles said about the RAF, and it gave me all these brilliant quotes. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. This article's going to be a breeze. And then I Googled them, I was like, none of these quotes exist. None of them. And I was like, thank God I didn't. I mean, so I think it's better than that now. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I wouldn't use it for that kind of journalism. That won't be a lesson. It's a tool. It's a tool, and I think it has its benefits and it has its drawbacks, and those will change as it becomes more powerful. But that's why Jim said, if you've got an awareness of what it can do and what it really shouldn't be doing, that's how to play.
I mean, when is your report going to come out on, and will it focus on AI?
We had this report last month that was a
Yes.
six country study, so that's sort of going to be an annual autumn thing, and then the next edition, the digital news report, which is the 48 country study, comes out next June. So we just quite bore you with it. It's a big heavy lifting exercise, has to be translated into 20 languages. We have to come on and but we're asking lots of questions about, are you trying to find out, are people just using chatbots for information, or are they really using it for news? I think some people think that a chatbot is basically, it's like a new type of search engine, which it absolutely isn't, right? So this is why some of the pitch the head of Google, sort of like, don't trust it. It's absolutely right. These, as I said, these aren't truth machines, but they can be fantastically useful for summarization, for converting from text into audio, and so on and so forth. So, we're only 3 years into this. People still getting their heads around it, but it's dangerous. It's potentially dangerous.
Well, dangerous if poorly used.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Okay. Well, in fact, actually, we've got a little clip from Sumit Pichai saying, "Truth matters, journalism matters." So it should be very reassuring to people in this room that actually we're all on the same side. We agree that it is going to. It will continue to have
some people in the news industry would debate whether Google's on the same side, but anyway,
he has
it's nice
tried
that
to
he
set
said it.
himself.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there are questions that I want to throw it open now, and so if anyone has anything to ask, then please, yes, go on now.
I guess this is a question for everyone, but there was a recent report from the Government Digital Sustainability Alliance, and it found that nearly 68% of data centers are near protected areas or key biodiversity areas, which rely on clean water supplies for the health of ecosystems, and 55% of global data centers are in river basins with high risk of water pollution. My question is is there a concern in the industry of the environmental impact of AI usage professionally?
You mean in journalism?
In journalism.
I'll be honest, I haven't encountered it.
I mean, I think there should be, to be honest. I think we should be concerned about the capital expenditure that's going into all of these data centres, and I think we should be concerned about the climate aspects of it. I think it's very, very hard that, you know, getting people engaged on the climate is more difficult rather than easier right now. And just like all these other things, using AI chatbots is addictive. And I do sometimes, I think, but Jim, do you really need that prompt? Is it really necessary? Because if you read how much power is consumed, even by a basic prompt, it is quite scary. I think it's not on the agenda, and I'm afraid I don't think policymakers are particularly keen to go there at the moment.
Do you have any thoughts on
No,
that?
I think they.
The hypocritical nature of we write endless pieces about climate change and then AI.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say the only thing I'd add is that it's not this is an excuse for a lack of concern, but it's something that's affecting all industry, right? I wouldn't suggest it's just journalism.
I mean, not just journalism, but maybe one should have a little more moral.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't know. We can get more solar panels and sort it out probably eventually.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. Thank you. Any? Yes. Yeah.
This is a not very positive question, so I apologize. Jim Egan, you were saying that AI isn't search, but unfortunately that's changing. So we're now in what we're calling a zero-click world, where the model that you're talking about, which is most media publishers are set up to have their content discovered through clicks. But the AI tools that are being used now, people are now defaulting and they're not bothering to click anymore. So the number of click-throughs to content in the last couple of months has dropped by about 60%. So I think that now changes the way that we're all having to think, whether it's journalism or the other media industries, because we have an entire funding model that has been set up across the media industries that's being destroyed by pure AI companies. And you know, my students are looking today at, hang on, but aren't digital platforms AI companies? How are they suddenly fighting with each other? So how does that then change the outlook if the way that journalism was kind of limping along won't work anymore either?
Well, I mean, you heard from my take is that it won't work anymore
Yeah.
in that format. And imagine if we had a strong, well-funded public service broadcaster that provided news to the nation that wasn't under
I know.
constant attack. That could
It's
feel
a
something.
creative thought.
Yeah.
It just might work.
I just think that click-based model, all that's left now, and tell me what's replacing what the traffic's been stolen by AI is Google Discover and Apple News. I'm sure, or whatever the Android equivalent is.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's seen those terrible clickbait headlines that you get if you swipe on one side of your phone or if you open the browser now. There's whole teams there now trying to desperately get you back because you're not searching for things anymore. So that's the sort of last gasp that you're seeing in action.
Yeah, I mean, what the bosses are betting on is the fact that they
Yeah.
can strike partnership deals.
Yeah.
Now,
Again.
they're doing that to a greater or lesser extent and successfully or otherwise. One could argue that, but certainly the news bigwigs across the industry are thinking, if we're getting cut out, if our click rates are dropping, these guys are building businesses based on our content, and they need to pay us. And if they're not paying us, they shouldn't be scraping our sites. But one could argue that those summaries are going to continue whether or not we're inside we've got a deal. I think brands become important to an extent, and direct traffic. So obviously, there's a lot of stuff is a search-based game, but there's another world in which people go to Jim's site direct, come to the Times direct, go to other trusted publishers direct, and aren't so reliant on click-through rates. But there's no getting away from the fact that it's a significant part of the industry.
I mean, did they at one point say that about Twitter as it used to be? That everything
But that
was
was just-
I mean, they said it about
Yeah.
Google, didn't they?
Yeah, but that's just one company
Yeah,
or platform, whereas this is now a funding model change, I
Exactly.
think.
Well, as Jim did point out though that people will still pay for stuff that helps them do their business well or helps them learn. That's
Yeah.
something they care a lot about, and I think that's still going to be the case. There's going to be a lot of sort of parasocial relationships where you have it with one person that you trust and you're willing to give them £5 or £6 a month. But I think there's one thing that I think people are missing with this is we keep talking about basically written journalism published as standalone news articles.
Yeah.
And there's two massive shifts that I just anecdotally everyone I know who's working journalists has noticed in the last 2 months, last 2 years, which is a sort of almost a collapse in reading of mass audiences as everyone just shifts to TikTok, Instagram, and short form video. That just people aren't spending as much time reading. And secondly, you know, the other side of that is like what, without getting too conceptual, like what is news? Is that local Instagram account that tells you what's opening and closing in your area run by a volunteer news? Is, I don't know, like big Instagram, like I'm Just Babe or UB1, UB2 out in West London, like are they news accounts? I mean, they kind of look a lot like news accounts. UB1, UB2 wrote multiple like national stories because like its users just send raw video of weird stuff going on in Southall, right? That's local news. It doesn't look like local news as we know it, but it's a business and it's producing content that's relevant to people's lives in their local areas. So that's the optimistic case, but I have a feeling we probably all need to pivot towards the optimistic case. Everyone's going to look at this really incredibly negative. But yeah, sure, it's probably not going to look like the format that has worked outside of a small audience that worked for outside of a small audience. The future probably isn't that written short word format. It's probably going to be something else, but you all have the tools and mentality to build that.
I mean, before I ask Jim Egan to jump in on this, I do have to say many of the pieces in London Centric are quite long.
Yeah, they're really good edit. They're too long, they really are.
Your piece on the stale farmer,
Yeah.
who was a tax avoidance, I'll show it,
You don't
in case
really
people don't know.
I mean, I'm not going to show 4,000 words.
No, it's not that. But they were quite long, and I
They were
think,
very, very long.
yeah, and they got a good, people were,
Okay, well, sorry, I mean, long and short, I do a certain sort of journalism which is basically entirely steering against everything I've been saying is where it's going. And the whole sell is that
so
everything
this is the story.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So that's a lot of words. That's a lot of words. And
How many people went to the bottom?
I don't care. What I care is that what I care is that 400 people signed up for an annual subscription off the back of it, and that will pay for my reporting for the next year.
And you also had Nick Harkway saying that he was going to print it off and carry it
I've
around.
had someone offer to buy the film rights. I mean, like you can make money off like
Exactly.
in lots of different.
A lot of people said to me that the film will be coming. Anyway, Jim, do you want to jump in?
I mean, I think it's a really good question, and I think it's the hardest part of the AI frontier for established news companies. One way or another, AI news companies are figuring out how to use AI in their tooling and in the newsroom and so on and so forth. I think the question of deal or no deal with the AI platforms is really hard and very, very difficult to have a good answer to. It's a bit easier if you're Robert Thompson and you're running the news empire and you've got the Wall Street Journal and the Times and the Sun like under your stable, because you can call Sam Altman up and he'll probably return your call tomorrow, right? If you're a small, battling national or regional news entity, very, very hard. And I think the lack of leverage that collectively the news industry has for doing deals on fair terms and getting the right value exchange for their content, I think that's a very, very big missing piece right now. There are some people talking about, it's grandiose terms like we need a NATO for news, an alliance of news organisations, so that we can have, a common front and so on and so forth. I don't know whether or not that's going to work, but either the news companies or intermediaries need to find a way of establishing leverage, basically bringing the AI giants to the table, because otherwise, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for smaller players.
Thank you. Yes?
When I was in the 20s, I was thinking of becoming a journalist, and I expected I would have to try and get on a local rag and then maybe get to a national paper and all that, and learn the ropes and all that. What you're saying is that the local papers are kind of going to be extinguished probably by all this pressure, and even the national, the main struggling because they're going to be, suffering from it. So then you mentioned about the B2B thing, where it's sort of like trade magazines and things. Are they going to be the only folk who actually train journalists then, or what? Or do they even do that? Do they expect trained journalists to already come to them already?
I think that would be one area. There will be an area where people are increasingly able to train and help themselves and to learn skills and so on and so forth. But there's some,
To help
as
DIY journalism.
as Jim was saying, there are important matters of complying and legaling stories and so on and so forth that you can't just you can't teach that to yourself and so on. But if you take local news and look, people running local news businesses, they're doing the very best job of keeping those businesses alive. But I think it's going to be very tough for them. But how many local news outlets are there now in the London area alone, Jim? I mean, there must be.
Well, there's lots of different definitions of them. I mean, look, I took on a trainee in March, trained her up, and 6 months later she got nominated for Young Journalist of the Year at the British Journalism Awards based on her reporting, because there was an incentive for me there to make her stuff really, really, really good. But I don't see the volume of people going through. So it's like, I'll have a job or two opening a year. I advertised recently, I've got 350 applicants for one job in a week. It's like, what do you do with that? I can take on 2 people a year. But there might be a lot of versions of that. I guess you're going to have to be a lot more hustly, a lot less relying on seeing that one Guardian job ad opening that everyone else is applying for. First 2 years of my career was spent as an insurance correspondent. On the first day I had a piece of paper, wrote insurance at the top, underlined it. It was just like, I don't know. It's just like wrote down what I knew. It was nothing. And I learned so much more from doing that than I would have ever learned sitting on the common desk at a national paper thinking that I'd already made it. So, yeah, I love the way the two options. You're either going to go off and become a creator, just doing YouTube videos, just opining on stuff, or you're going to go and write about the bond markets for a B2B publication. Maybe these are the only reasons.
No, that's a funny contrast here. I mean, though there are, we had a media forum on local journalism
Right.
a few weeks ago, and we got Social Spider, CIC, they have 5 papers. We got Ed Jennings, who's got 2 Substacks in Kent.
Right.
So not particularly London, but doing a lot of important work on the Reform-run council.
Right. Okay.
So, and their stories are different. So there are, and there is.
But it's not mass audience.
The
Like,
Londoner.
that piece is one of the best pieces I've ever written. I've got 4,000 people who pay to see those members-only pieces. No one in this room, I assume, is bothering to spend like 7 or 8 quid a month on a subscription. So it's inherently the problem is there's also the democratic element of like, am I informing everyone? No, I'm basically building a model to do the reporting I want to do, but that's not reaching a mass audience, and that's the real challenge. Because you're going to have people asking how to vote at the next election of these chatbots. They're going to be asking people to summarise the key positions of all political parties, and they're going to be feeding off whatever has been fed into them.
Or whatever their political motivation is.
Or whatever Elon Musk has programmed it on that day to say.
Yeah, the Dutch government actually banned the use of AIs for
Really?
told me how to vote, because in previous Dutch election the answers have been so like just getting the parties wrong and so on,
Yeah.
let alone their policy platform. So I think the Netherlands is probably a small enough country where they were actually able to say, look, you guys cannot answer prompts about how should I vote and so on and so on and so forth. But these things are an issue, but we haven't really started talking about it yet. But I think one thing that all these developments are probably going to do is underscore and reinforce the public service argument for some sort of public intervention in the news and media landscape, and that's the sort of conversation we should be having about the future of the BBC and Channel 4 and other plays in the public service landscape. But of course, that's not a conversation now.
No, because none of us, I mean, you were with the BBC, not as a journalist. I was with the BBC at one time, as a journalist, but none of us are with the BBC. So we're all talking about different, models of, we're looking at a different way of doing journalism rather than talking about public service broadcasting and so on and so forth. So, though I agree, that is the topic to look at as well.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
for another-
Well, Charter Review starts to get the other side of Christmas, and hopefully, there will start to be a serious everyone has their views on the BBC, and everyone's opinions are valid, but be very careful about blowing it up.
Good point. Do you want to say anything further on this? Okay. Any more questions? Yes. Yes, sir. At the back.
Well, pretty much following on from what you've been saying, is there no way around setting up something and not going down the YouTube and Instagram and the like route in order to make it successful and profitable and get that awareness? And I suppose it follows up on what you've just been saying about, do we need to look at a different approach to this whole situation from a public benefit point of view, and is that the way to counteract the current economic model that we have, which seems to be that the YouTubes and the TikToks of this world take most of the money from the people who are actually doing the groundwork and actually providing the content, and somehow it seems to me we need to get back some of that money in order to provide, so that, because I'm pretty sure they don't need to build another Death Star sized headquarters somewhere in the world, which is what we seem to spend all this money on. And as you said, basic good journalism is dying. So how do we start that process? Have you any ideas about where we might go, or are we doomed to being in the hands of Google and the like forevermore?
Oh, that's what I want.
Each have a crack. You can start. Alex, would you want to start since you...
I mean, I feel like that's what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I feel like the guys, we've been kind of trying to navigate ways in which we might be able to, whether it's through partnerships, whether it's through boxing a bit clever, there is the BBC, that is, a £3.5 billion, organisation funded by the public that continues to exist and create, impartial, trusted journalism. There's no suggestion that's going to be dismantled by charter. So, I think I would just say that I feel like we're, insofar as we're able to, share our views about what future might look like from an optimistic point of view, I feel like we've set those things out, I would say.
Okay, 3 quick ideas. One, how would you feel if there was a must-carry bit for worthy news before every Instagram video that you wanted to watch? How would people in this room feel about that? Because that's basically what BBC One did when they put the news on in the middle of whatever big entertainment thing and before the film would come on at 10:30. That's what you used to have to do if you wanted to watch content in the pre-internet era. And I bet people here would hate it. You're sitting there trying to watch that video your friend sent you, and you're having to watch a 30-second clip of Keir Starmer and what he's been up to today. it would and so there's, and fundamentally, you're all making your choices. The people who are flicking through stuff on their phones in between classes, you're looking at Instagram, you're not reading the worthy stuff. People are often honest with what they're doing with their own behaviour. And another thing is that let's not pretend that what came before was always great. I was talking to the former managing editor of The Sun from the 80s the other day, who cheerily told me that in the newsroom they had a sign saying, "Make it fast, make it funny, make it up." And he told this as a sort of great anecdote, and I went, okay. So, the idea that there was a before times in which everyone was a noble journalist, striking the purest of truths, and the internet came along, it's not really the case. So there will be, you can call out bullshit and fact check it so much better than that. So I guess, this sort of slightly...
We used to have one at the BBC as well. When I used to work at the World Service, we used to say, because we were always slower than CNN, so we would say, CNN never wrong for long.
Yeah, I think that's the Sky News, Sky News that said that as well.
We used to just excuse that for the sense, but anyway. Yeah, but what were your other ideas? That was one.
I think that's sort of two random points. I won't try and make it harsh. Don't hold it.
Oh, okay.
I had a third, but it got lost somewhere in the ether.
What about you, Jude?
I don't really have an answer to a very good question like that, other than kind of restating that, if you look at things in an international context, it feels bad and tough here, but you'd be surprised how much worse it is in many other places. And one thing which isn't really an optimistic note, but it's an energizing note, is like what are 12 months we have ahead in terms of the journalism industry and what's going to be happening with succession at the BBC Charter review process, as people are probably aware. Sky have approached ITV to buy ITV's channels, which would have a huge implication for ITN, who provides news for ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. The company which owns Sky, Comcast themselves, may merge with Paramount, who also, with Warner Brothers Discovery, who also owns CNN. So all of a sudden you've got ITN and Sky News and CNN in the same stable. Like, that's the sort of thing no one ever would imagine. As you can see, we've got I'm not going to say anything dismissive about it, but we've got quite a story at the Telegraph. What hasn't been happening to the Telegraph. So if you can step away from sort of the collapse of democracy and society and the world order we knew, and just kind of observe it, it is an absolutely fascinating time in terms of what's going on in the sector. And as students of it, I assume we have a number of students in the room. It's an amazing time to be pursuing journalism studies.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. But first you and then.
Oh.
And then.
So I'm wondering sort of about, you've talked about the idea of like the niche and the elite, and that's who's going to be paying for these stories. Do you think with that there's going to be sort of an influx in consumption of opinion journalism, or if that's going to rise as compared to just straight up reporting, as people get sort of more and more, I don't really know how to finish
I think that's already happened. Right? I mean, Pete comment does really well. Podcasts are cheap. You can put two people talking to each other for 3 hours discussing one headline that they've misinterpreted, and that will ultimately make you more money. So, some of the pieces that I put out cost thousands of pounds, and then people just reply saying they hated it because they didn't really like the things that you uncovered. That can happen. Comments really easy and much more profitable a lot of the time, and people prefer it in terms of the amount of resource you have to put in to get a really good news story. Yeah.
And then for Substack, talking about sort of democracy and accessibility, how do you know where to draw that line between what's paid and what's unpaid for your subscribers?
It's a really good question. I don't really know. I've been experimenting. My rule. So for people who don't know, some posts might be free, some posts might be paywall, some have a paywall halfway down. So you kind of want to not piss off your audience who are reading for free, but also just slowly grind them down to the point where they just have to pay because they just need to know how that story ends. I mean, Charles Dickens was doing this 50 years ago when his mistress lived 3 streets over from here, and he'd be sitting there working out how to put a cliffhanger at the end of each of his chapters so people bought the next edition of the paper was published in. It's the same principle.
Do you think you'll stick with the reader revenue model, or are you thinking of other ways of making money?
It's making money, and it's doing quite well, and it's enabling me to do the journalism I want. And when I do stories that are really juicy and interesting and well written and not too sensationalist, more people pay me money. I can't think of at the moment. I feel like the luckiest man in journalism that those incentives and the money are aligning. So every time I do a story that's really, really good, I can then hire another freelancer for another day to go and do another story that's really, really good. Where everyone else is in a bit of a spiral. So I am, having the time of my life while working 80-hour weeks and looking slightly frazzled in front of you tonight.
Interesting.
Do you?
No, I think that was a good question for Jim to talk about.
Yeah, but that guy at the back's been
No, the first question, there's this one, and then you, and then, yeah.
Do you think short form vertical video can be an elite format, or is it is there going to be a sort of written versus audio visual divide? Bespoke news, it can be a positive thing, and it can just turn into a echo chamber, a feed versus fake socials of slop, basically.
I don't think there's anything intrinsically about short-form video that makes it good or bad. I mean, it's proving to be a very, very popular format. It's a bit like podcasts. It's been knocking around for nearly 15 years, but suddenly become really, really popular. And you know, you can see outlets like The Economist, the New York Times doing fantastic short form video, and there's a whole load of rubbish out there as well. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but I don't make a value judgment about the format per se.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or, it can be the both and. You know, some of the stuff that the guys in the newsroom do, they put out on TikTok and it does really well, and then there'll be a longer read if you want to. There was a story about Hitler's DNA or something.
Yeah.
Apparently it was like the most, I don't know, blew up on the TikTok channel, millions of views, but then lots of people were engaging with the article as well, so, you know, it's another way in.
I heard about a tool that was emerging to help creators make that shift into short form video because they just weren't used to talking to a camera like that. And I was wondering, do you feel like that's needed in order to stabilise and improve the standing of short form video?
Well, I mean, if you're rubbish and you can't talk to a camera, you shouldn't be making short form videos, should you? I'm not being dismissive of it. It's the same thing like you shouldn't be making TV news report if you're not engaging, interesting, and can't, you know. So the people, what I'm saying is, if you can do that, you're going to end up with a job, and if you want to take your story that you believe is brilliant and you write it in a format that people your age aren't going to engage with, then no one's going to read it. So take it to the format that they're looking at. If you in your heart, if you just the best focus group you've got is yourself and what you and your friends are doing, what you're sharing, what is engaging you, and then if you've got a story to tell, and you work out how you get it into that feed, how you get it there, and that's how you'll be able to tell stories to the mass market in the future.
Have you, Alex, ever had to, have you written a story and then it's been, they asked you to do a short form video?
No. Bits.
The New York Times has no
You guys are going good
Yeah,
on it.
bits. I have done just this week, I don't know if they ever published it, but they asked me, I probably wasn't very good to be honest with you. In fact, I'm not sure I was trying to be.
You're very interesting yourself.
I had to do a video for the socials, but I'm not sure it was gone out. About the BBC, and obviously there's been lots of events this week, because they wanted me to distill it, but I'm not sure I quite got the format right. But yes, so the short answer is
they're starting.
They're leaning into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're leaning into it. Yeah. And The Economist is actually leaning into another thing too, long videos. Have you seen their Insider series with Zanny Minton-Meadows getting her team around to discuss a particular topic? 90 minutes.
I mean, YouTube is, all the narrative about YouTube is, long videos, everyone thought it was short form, people are watching video podcasts, like Jim said, they go on for hours, but, on big screen TVs, so there's no, there's no one single answer, because we live in a fragmented,
mediascape.
Yeah, where there's millions of people that can access stuff more easily than ever before, so, there's no need to limit, we need to be thinking, broad.
Now that gentleman there, yes?
Hello.
Yeah, you.
Only. Okay, thank you. I was going to say, through the rise in the stuff like AI and stuff, what does that spell for the quality of written journalism in an age where there's such a strong emphasis on instant information? Has the original ethos of written journalism permanently shifted as an attempt to weather the current landscape? In that, what is seen to be like a good piece of written journalism is based on like how many click targets you can get?
No, it's a very good question. I think there is a risk that good quality, well-written journalism may be in shorter supply, and like we saw Rashmi showed the example of Dawn in Pakistan, where someone had clearly just put a press release through ChatGPT and so on. So there's a risk of that. But I think it's important that we hold our nerve and we say, surely that's not the future of journalism. That's certainly not the future of journalism that anyone's going to want to pay for, right? Certainly not on an ongoing basis. So I think there are some values that do. They're buffeted. They're under pressure, but there's some values that remain, right? And I think really, really good storytelling through the hard graft of journalism is something that may feel somewhat diminished, may feel a bit different, but I don't think it's dying out.
No, Jim's proof of that. We just see this 4,000 word snail that generated 400 new subscribers. That's the answer. I'd say there's definitely still a role for that.
I'm going to insist that the man in the green.
Man in the green. All right. Okay. So my question is, well, not question. Yeah, well, it is a question.
Come on, you've had your mouth.
No, literally, you know what it is? I'm thinking how to frame it because it's just so all over the place in my head. So you know what it is? So looking at the journalism landscape and how it evolved from print to broadcast and then to social media. And then social media has now become interest media. Then you've got the social media bred these group of influencers that are now replacing the journalists, the PR professionals, the advertisers, the marketeers. And then you've got now AI now coming in to replace us all essentially. So I'm saying, don't we need a regulator? Who regulates AI? And there are copyright issues. Now think about it, you've got Ofcom that regulates broadcast, you've got people that regulate IPSO, all these. So think about it, who regulates AI and who regulates social media? Like who's the watchdog for social media and who's the regulatory body like Ofcom for AI, artificial intelligence? I think this is a conversation that we all need to be having, especially news organizations need to all be coming together and trying to create some type of body or some authority that oversees the role that this AI plays. Yeah, like where are you lot at with all of that?
I mean, there's a moment in government, isn't it, when they're trying to work out between the department of the DCMS and DC as to who should be responsible for the relationships and managing those kind of copyright deals that you're talking about when it comes to, articles, summarisations, and you've got to have something. It's so fast moving that in order for the government to regulate and for regulators to be ruling on stuff, it's difficult while things are still so fast evolving. I think what they don't want to do is stifle what there is clearly market demand for. And
but then, sorry to interrupt you, the zero click that Dr. Bourne spoke about earlier, if there was some type of regulatory body, AI would possibly not be able to be used in a search engine type of aspect because you've already got AI churning algorithms on social media. So I don't know if I'm wording it the right way. Do you know what I mean? But I'm trying to land. Yeah.
It's a really good point, and it's really smart. The challenge, right? There's two things. One, the public do clearly like these AI summaries more than having to click through to articles and try and work out what's going on. I think Jim's been really good at pointing this out. That rather than sort of just because something is being destroyed in the process doesn't mean it's this is where people are quite happy getting a lot of their stuff from. And also in terms of the regulator, I mean, I have this talk that I do for media organisations on the state of where things are at, and I have a slide which is basically entitled something like, it's easier to scream at what we understand and know than to try and deal with the enormity of what's happening. So, you can shout at the BBC because you understand how to shout at the BBC. Like it's there and there's a boss that you can lobby to get sacked, or you can moan about the way a print newspaper, why are we still talking about print newspapers in this room tonight, is covering a topic, because the sort of try and understand the fact that 3 million people have just seen a completely fake bit of hate speech on some TikTok platform and no one even knows why is so incomprehensible that we can't quite confront it. I mean, just look at what's happened to Twitter under Elon Musk, where it is essentially unregulated. It is normally regulated in the UK, but racial slurs that you just could not have got away with on there a year or two ago, if you report them, they just don't get deleted. They are breaching almost every bit of the guidelines by doing that on all sorts of aspects of Ofcom. Does Ofcom want to intervene and have a battle with Elon Musk? No, we would prefer to just keep sort of having little rows around the edges of the BBC, because that's manageable. They can cope with that. They know they probably lose if you take on Elon. And that's the other one. Like, what do you do when these things are bigger than a nation state? And does any politician have the willingness to take them on? Because you used to the PM in the UK used to clearly be able to shout and bully the BBC because that's the order of power. But when you're dealing with these things that are all around everywhere, who's even willing to get them in line?
Interesting.
So there's that lady, that girl there, and then there's you, and I think then we'll be out of time.
Yeah, just really quickly
before I say my question, just an answer there. Well, not necessarily for the UK. Regarding media regulators, I'm Irish and I was previously involved in like a youth advisory capacity with the Irish Commission de Man. Because Twitter and TikTok have their European headquarters in Ireland, the Irish government has like an online safety act, so not quite like AI, but in terms of things like online safety, there's really interesting developments there in terms of that. So if you're interested, I would really highly recommend you look into their work because
What's
it's
it
quite
called, sorry?
interesting. Commission de Man.
Okay, cool.
It's interesting the developments that are going to be coming there. They're very much focused on taking on Twitter. Elon Musk is very not happy with them because, of course, they have access to like Europe through that. But basically, just for you guys, kind of on a more philosophical note, going forward as we're going to see more and more journalism through social media, particularly given the rise of AI, like, where do we see the line of like what becomes the line between creator, AI, and journalism? Like we saw those AI anchors. Like how are we going to now define that? For example, in 10 years' time when people have children, like how are we going to teach them about journalists when it could be, I don't know, AI anchor Erica Jones on BBC? Like how do we teach the next generation media literacy when we're already struggling with that ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a good answer to that, right? Things are moving very, very quickly, and I think often what is acceptable is defined by what people will put up with and what they will take to, and people have taken to the internet and social media extremely enthusiastically because we can quite properly debate the merits and the corporate morality of where these people are coming from, but they're producing good products, right? And I suspect you are going to start seeing this AI integrated more and more. It will reach a stage before too long where people will stop calling it AI because people just sort of understand that it's inside and so on. I mean, we track the effectiveness of media literacy programs around the world because a number of different countries have tried these things and so on and so forth. The evidence is a bit patchy. It doesn't say that if you roll out a really good national media literacy program, everyone figures out how not to fall for deepfakes and so on and so forth. I think a lot of this comes down to what people are brought up with, and that's a problem for those of us who are parents and those of you who are going to be parents, is trying to figure out what is okay and what's not okay, and what you should be telling your kids about how to navigate this area. I think that sort of domestic action is in the end probably more powerful than big national media literacy programs, not to dismiss them.
Personal responsibility? That's what you're saying?
Also, old people are definitely about the worst. Yeah. And all this focus on what do we tell the teenagers who can tell a deep fake from a mile off, like the old people on Facebook doing cry laugh emojis and video flights on AI video. I think it's the wrong way around.
I mean, there's this case of this Sri Lankan creator of all these AI videos on migrants in the channel, and it was rampant on. He runs a school for young people to learn how to make these videos and earn $300,000, he says. So, and they're for old people. He says that's the for old people.
Brilliant. What a world we've created.
There you go. Alex, do you have a comment on that? Or?
Just, I think maybe take heart from the fact this is all in its infancy, and people are still trying to figure it out. And one would hope that as things settle down, as it were, or become more familiar, then platforms, these organisations, regulators, government, will catch up.
Better sense of prepared. Yeah. Okay, last question, Joanne. Yes.
My question is, what skills should a journalism student focus on developing to remain competitive in an AI-driven media landscape?
I don't know that they. I mean, look, I think the core fundamentals haven't changed. My advice to young journalists would be, to try and find an area they're passionate about, build a strong network, get a good understanding of what the story is, and everything will come around that. If you work harder, you're in the right place at the right time. One would hope that the fundamentals haven't significantly changed because there will always be appetite for good quality original journalism.
Thank you. Jim Waterson.
Oh, my terrifying final thought.
Yes.
Develop the skills as a reporter, if reporting is the bit you want to do, that can't be done with AI, because then you'll still have an employment prospect. If it's picking up the phone, knowing how to work a story, and knowing how to do anything. If you can't do the research with an AI, then you've got a sort of unique thing you can bring to the table. But equally then, do the thing we keep talking about, which is terrify the older people in the newsroom by understanding how to use the tools for distribution. So sort of slightly like, embrace the most old school stuff in terms of I can find out information that you can't just get through a chatbot, and then work out how to use the AI to distribute it and get it out there better than the generation that came before.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. So you're studying journalism, so learn how to be journalists. And I don't mean turn yourselves also into statisticians and accountants and computer science majors and so on, but I would encourage you to take an active interest in what we gradually call data science. It's basically understanding stats. Take an interest in the numbers, like know the difference between a profit and loss and a balance sheet and so on, because one day, if you're any good, you're going to have to kind of work and build those things. And also, as Jim said, we're still talking about newspapers, but newspapers really aren't going to be around during your work. Magazines might be and so on, but basically you are entering a digital landscape, and you need to know a bit about digital products. You need to know the difference between the CMS and the CRM. And anyway, you get my point. Be journalists, but be inquisitive and interested in those areas of finance, stats, and digital.
Okay. Well, that's very encouraging, insightful, and I think it was thoroughly delightful. So thank you very much, and let's give everyone a big coming down to Goldsmith and glass and something. I hope it's okay.
I'm sorry.